Today, you're in for a treat because I'm speaking with Stephen Foster, who's going to take us on a ride in his bike on the perimeter of the US and sharing with us amazing stories of leadership and what he has written in his book about passion, about power, and about purpose. Enjoy my conversation with Stephen. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today I'm delighted to speak to a legend in our industry. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about workshop. We're going to talk about advisory. We're going to talk about veterans. But we're going to talk about this great human being. His name is Stephen Foster. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, my brother. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I've had many introductions over my career. I don't know that someone's going to top that one. So thank you for that. I'm humbled.
Thank you very much. And I also learned to pronounce correctly the name of your company because you're the managing partner of Foster+Fathom, which for an immigrant from Belgium is not always easy to pronounce.
Well, it's not easy for native-born Americans either. I think there's a lot of F's and T's and H and M's, and there's an ampersand in the middle. So it is Foster+Fathom, which I'll just let you know because I get asked this question a lot. So who is Fathom, right? Because I'm Foster. And I went, Well, here's the truth. I'm not the Foster in Foster+Fathom. Fathom means to know, understand fully. And our Foster means to grow, and Fathom means to know and understand fully. So it's to grow and to know. And so there is no Foster, and you're the Fathom.
Interesting. You know, let me share just quickly a story. My very first company was Untitled. And I would play on two characters because, First of all, in Belgium, whether you speak French or Flemish, Incentive would read incentive, which is what I was doing. And I will go at a brand new company, 29 years kid, getting into a prospect and say, well, the company was founded at the beginning of the century by an Argentinian and an American, Arnoldo Ince y Cordoba and William Reuven Tive III. And I would speak for 2 minutes. And then I would say, I just made this up. I just started the company. People would laugh or remember us. But it was not as elaborate as Foster+Fathom. So anyway, Stephen, you've been in the industry for many years. As I said at the beginning, you're truly a legend. You're doing a lot of advisory board, chapter retreat. We met thanks to MPI years ago. You're volunteering with the different organization. But first and foremost, how did you get into this amazing meetings and events industry?
Well, I'm 67 years old, so I got into this industry like a lot of my peer age group did because I just stumbled into it. It wasn't even really an industry almost. I was living in Hawaii at the time, working as a journalist. That was my career path. And at that time, Hawaii state certified tour guides for the first time. And they had a series of classes and certifications and language and music and history. And being on the newspaper desk, we sent 5 reporters to go through that training. On the day that it started, one of them was unable to go. And so the city desk editor said, guess what you're going to be doing for the next 6 weeks? So I went through it. I love history. I'm an avid reader. So I lived in Hawaii about a year at that time. So I loved it. I was trying to learn more about the culture and the history. I went through the certification, and at the end of the certification, to acquire it, you had to take a written test, but then you had to get on a bus and do what was called a Circle Island tour around Oahu and give a tour, an 8-hour tour, I would add.
8 hours?
8 hours, which would be a normal Circle Island day tour, right, for tourists and visitors. You had to give that tour to 16 of the proctors. And they graded you and they would ask you questions and you had scripting so you had to know where you were and what was going on. And you had to talk about the plants and the flowers and the history and the culture and the music and the evolution of industry and know the language. And I just found it fascinating. And so I had 2 days off a week as a reporter. I had Wednesdays and Thursdays, and I got hired by a tour company. They offered me a part-time 2-day gig. And within probably less than a year, I had said, you know what? I'm making more money as a tour guide. I'm having more fun as a tour guide. And so I said, I'm going to make a career change. And I did that at age 28. And that led me on a series of adventures that got me back to the mainland and in Texas. And then from there, it was training tour guides at a destination management company in Dallas that led to another opportunity. And so here I am all those years later. So I'm a huge proponent of what we would call continuing adult education.
Yeah.
But just being available to try something that you may have no expertise in, but then you find out that you have a true love for it. So best decision I ever made. And I don't even know the name of the reporter that got sick that day and didn't show up, but whoever he or she is, I owe them a huge debt of gratitude for setting me on a career path that I absolutely love.
His name is Roger Fathom.
Well, okay, Roger Fathom. Could be. I don't know. Could be.
Further in your career, and also want to talk about that because I think it's very interesting for people listening and business owners listening. You had the opportunity to acquire a company with your wife.
I did.
And tell us a little bit about that. What made the decision of acquiring a business instead of starting one, and how did that go?
Well, again, another one of those, my paths kind of intersected. I actually met and married my wife through an organization that you and I both have been members of for a long time, MPI, Meeting Professionals International. I say all the time, in fact, I'm famous for saying MPI is a heart thing. And that certainly is my case personally and professionally. So I met Wendy when I was working at this destination management company. She was right out of college and worked in the company. And then, years evolved and we got together and got married. And after a while, she left and went to work for a business. And we had an opportunity to acquire that business. It was a meetings and event ranch in North Texas. You're familiar with it because we hosted an event.
Circle R
Ranch. That's right. In beautiful Flower Mound, Texas. So we acquired that operation and we ran it for 18 years. It was an amazing experience. I had never owned a business. I had certainly operated businesses for other entities in senior management, but this was all on us. And what was interesting is it was a family-owned and operated business before. And obviously with Wendy and I being married, it remained a family-owned and operated business. But those businesses have their own set of inherent problems, especially when you take one over and there are still employees from the previous family. So I can tell you that I spent my first 30 days firing people. I was very popular. And we started from scratch, rebuilt it to host corporate meetings, association meetings, and not so much social and local. And we had an amazing team. I brought people that had worked with me. Wendy had contacts. We had such support from MPI and from Dallas-Fort Worth. And we did some amazing things there. It is still in the hands of a married couple who we hired. And they are running it today. And they're doing an amazing job, Jason and Hillary Roberts. So a little shout out for them. But, you learn a lot as a business owner. It pushes you to live in your lane and continually grow. And when your wife is your business partner, you get used to hearing no at home and on the job. We say that a lot. But Wendy and I both had talents and strengths, and we tried to play to those. We weren't so much hung up on titles. We were hung up on getting stuff done and getting people in and servicing our customers and building a great team. I think that's, if you asked Wendy today, we did some amazing events. We produced events for the NFL, for Super Bowl, for Major League Baseball. We hosted the Academy of Country Music. We did a ton of just amazing events. But I think the thing that we're most proud about is that business still today is viable and is well known, not just here in Texas, outside Texas, for what we coined this genuine Texas hospitality. It's welcome into our home, and very proud of that.
No, I was speaking with Wendy, and she told me that one of the key success was actually to separate responsibilities. At home, she was the boss, and in the business, she was the boss.
She was. Absolutely. And that has worked really, really well for us. There is no doubt about that. Happy wife, happy life. And if your
Right.
professional life is married there, then you want to make her very happy.
No, but no, in all seriousness, you see, my French is coming back sometimes. I just say maintenant, which is now. But in all seriousness, how did you manage so that you're not working 24/7? In other words, when you're going home in the evening, oh, I forgot to tell you this and that. Because I know a lot of people that are working with their spouses, significant others. What are your advice for people that run a business with their life partner?
Well, that's a tough one, but I think I'm going to give you an answer you don't expect, and it's true. We didn't really try to say, okay, it's 5 o'clock, we're punched out. Now we become Stephen and Wendy. The reality is, we consider that an asset. Is that we could on the weekend when we were grocery shopping or we were at one of our kids, recitals or sports games, say, oh, hey, I had an idea, or I was thinking about this. So, I don't know that we consciously ever said we have to turn the switch off. We were certainly mindful that we couldn't always be talking business, but you do that as a couple, right? You figure that out. I saw that as a strength. And I had people all the time say to me, and I'm sure Wendy did as well, I could never work with my wife. How do you do that? Or I could never work with my husband. And I said, well, I can see why you would say that. And I don't think a lot of people can. And I give Wendy a ton of credit. Wendy was, and will remain one of the smartest people I've ever met. One of the most naturally gifted servant leaders that I've ever met. So we just did that dance. And I think, honestly, it made our marriage stronger. And I certainly know that when people saw us work together, they saw a genuine affection and respect. Yes, when you talk to us, you were talking to the bosses, but I think they saw that. And I'd like to think they saw that as something valuable, because I certainly did.
It's awesome. Going back to the moment where you banged the business, is there anything that you would have done differently, analyzed differently, or question you would have asked that you didn't if you had to do that again?
Oh, yeah, tons. How much time do you have? I think for me, the decisions that I made, I think there were times when I was so focused on changing the culture that we inherited to make it better, and it needed to be, that I sometimes didn't fully explain to the people that were helping me build that culture what the end game was. A lot of times, and this in our industry, you're in the thick of it, you're producing events, clients are changing. Gosh, back then we used to complain about, oh my gosh, it's a year away and they want to start signing contracts. And now they're signing contracts within 2 weeks. And we're going, gosh, I wish they would sign a year ago. So I think that I moved too fast at times, and I didn't always share the route, the end game, the goal, instead of just saying, Eric, we got to do this, you do this, I'll do this. And afterwards, I consciously said that a lot. And later or afterwards, we'll circle back and we'll break it down. And the reality is we were successful. It happened, but I'm sure that we could have had we certainly could have had some employees that probably felt a little more included and a little more bought into the process. But I think, that's probably the main thing that I would change. And then I think I also would have tried to be a little more intentional about saying thank you to the team. Now, I think they would tell you that they loved working for us. And again, we have people that stayed with us for years and years and years. But I've certainly learned now, and I know I'm more intentional now, saying thank you to the team that really is the face and the brand and the heart and the soul of the business. You get a lot of love when you're the boss, right? Or when you're the external face in the community. The reality is, I wasn't the guy setting the tables. I wasn't the guy hiring and training the team. I wasn't delivering the service. All of those powerful people who were our employees, who were our family. And so you can just never never say thank you enough, never do enough to reward that and set that out.
How much of your personal experience as a business owner, running a team and planning events, are you using when you are facilitating retreat for chapters, when you're doing advisory board? Or do you bring anything from your personal experience into that? What is the link there?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I think all of us, we are products of the journey we've been on. So when I'm working as a facilitator and someone's brought me in to help build culture or team, I say this all the time. I worked for five of the most awesomely outstanding business owners, leaders you'd ever want to meet. And I also worked for five of the most disgustingly, terribly bad owners. And I learned from all of them. And so I'm constantly pulling from my experiences being an employee. I pull from my experiences of being a business owner to say, okay, now it is my responsibility. I may operate in this 30,000 foot area. That's the language you like. But the reality is the people that are on the ground or even at 10,000 feet, they need to know what's going on in that space between. Mm-hmm. And so I'm constantly pulling from that. And I pull a lot of information from my almost 55 plus years of riding motorcycles, because I've learned a lot about managing direction and momentum and balance and keeping people focused and moving forward, riding with a bunch of great guys and gals. So whether it's on the seat of a motorcycle, on a bike, or in business, keeping momentum, keeping balance, making sure that you're fueled up and ready to go, that's all part of the package.
And thank you for this easy transition, because obviously that's something that I want to talk about with this conversation today. I want to speak about what you do for veterans with the Booth campaign. I want to talk about your book, Full-Throttle Leadership, which I read and loved. And one of the examples you are mentioning in the book is when you ride with your pack, with your friends, it's not always the same person who's in front. There's a responsibility, but also it's part of the team. So I really love that example if you compare with business. But let's talk about, first of all, leadership. Let's talk about what it takes to be a leader, how you define a leader. And then we can also transition into how this passion for biking, you decided to put the two together. But let's focus first on leadership, because sure. I think it's very important.
Well, I think I can make that pretty simple for you. Leaders are not born, they become. And what I mean by that is you are constantly learning and serving the team that rides with you. And that's how I phrase it when I'm using the motorcycle analogy. You picked one of my favorite parts of the book. And again, if you don't ride motorcycles, and you don't have to ride motorcycles to be a good leader, it is a lot of fun. But there are so many lessons from motorcycling and leadership. And one of them is that as a leader, you cannot stay out front all of the time. Just like if I'm leading a ride and you and 10 of our buddies are going down the highway in that staggered flying V formation, if I'm the head road captain, if I'm out front, then I can tell you what's happening out front. There is a lot of blowback. I am constantly scanning the road for challenges, conditions that might change. And I'm also required to communicate that back to you. And I'm not through walkie-talkies, not through communications, through a series of very deliberate hand signals and motions that are passed back from the front. So as a leader, you just can't stay out front. There's too much resistance. There's too much blowback. There's too much intense focus. You have to be able to do what we call rotate back in the pod and let your wingman come up and assume that number one position. By the way, this is a lesson of nature. If you've ever seen Canadian snow geese migrate in the sky, they work in a flying V formation. They fly in a V. The reason they do that, they can go farther as a group on the wind dynamic, and it creates less blowback, but you'll see them constantly rotate back. And if you've ever been to a military air show, You've seen the same thing. Blue Angels, Thunderbirds, the Red Wings from the UK in the Flying V. So, and watch the next time you're in your car, which we call a cage in the motorcycle world, because you're hermetically sealed, listening to some voice tell you where to go. You'll see that dynamic happen. You'll see if it's a good riding club, you'll see them in a staggered formation. You'll see them passing back the hand signals, and you'll see them move in a very coordinated fashion. That is the definition of leadership. That is the definition of a successful team. That is the definition of winning in life, is moving together, working together, and serving everyone who rides with you every day to do the job you do, whatever it is.
I love it. And so some years ago, you decided to basically ride on the perimeter of the US.
I did a US perimeter ride.
Can you, US perimeter ride? Yeah, it's not too bad. You at least you understood my question. So the accent was not too bad. So
no, buddy, we've known each other a long time. I'm learning to speak Ericese pretty darn easy. And by the way, kudos to you, because I'm really just a Southern boy from Mobile, Alabama. So I know I talk funny.
Well, the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, as my friend Michael Owen would say.
He would.
So what triggered this idea of riding the US perimeter, but also planning it and executing it?
Well, that was another case of sort of two very distinct passions sort of coming together. So as a biker, there are some biker bucket list rides that if you're a real biker, you would do. And certainly going to a rally like the Sturgis Rally, or doing a Four Corners ride of the United States. But the granddaddy of them all, no doubt about it, is called the Perimeter Ride. It's actually first done by a lady named Hazel Cobb, who was one of the premier leading advocates of female motorcycling. And she rode the Perimeter, and she wrote a book about it. And then it sort of became, the Mount Rushmore of motorcycle ride. Now, number one, to do a perimeter ride, it's going to take you a minimum of 30 days. You just can't stay on the bike that much. So that's one of the reasons a lot of people haven't attempted it, is you've got to have the time to go do it. So for me, it was always on the list, but it was one of those things. I have several things on my bucket list. I want to fly on Air Force One day, but the perimeter ride was kind of like flying on Air Force One as well. I'd like to do it, but I'm not sure I can do it. So it just sort of sat on the shelf. And then back in 2010, I was introduced to this organization called the Boot Campaign. And the Boot Campaign is a veteran service organization founded in Texas, where I live, by 5 amazing Texas women who read a book called Lone Survivor. It's the account of Operation Red Wings by Marcus Luttrell. And it's an amazing book. It was turned into a movie. I highly recommend you read the book. Although if you like Mark Wahlberg, it's a good movie as well. That book really is about what we're talking about, Eric. It's about service. It's about sacrifice. And it's also about making sure that the story is told. And so these 5 women read this book, and they had this idea. We should do something. And so they came up with something very, very simple. We call it a freedom selfie. They got a pair of combat boots. They went to a park during a concert. They let people take pictures in the boots, and they donated a couple $100 to a local veterans charity. What they didn't know at the time, they thought they were done, is they weren't done, because thanks to just some local news reporting, that story went viral. People, they just connected with it, and they started to get phone calls from people who would tell us about your organization, but there wasn't an organization. It was a one-off. And that started them thinking, maybe we should consider doing something. So they started this nonprofit called the Boot Campaign, whose mission was simple. When they come back, we give back. And let's fast forward. 10 plus years later, the Boot Campaign, which started with 5 women saying, hey, let's just do something, is now one of the nation's top rated veteran service organizations. They have given back $2 million plus every year they've been in existence. And they are the gold standard for veteran wellness and family support, in my humble opinion. They do amazing work. Their mission has expanded. And so I was introduced at an organization because I didn't know it at the time, but while they were reading the book, so was I. And I was having a similar moment as a military kid, as someone whose family has served, and my older brother was a career Army officer. I said, I live a pretty blessed life. I live in a great country, and I can get on my motorcycle and ride wherever I want to, and nobody can stop me. And so I started talking about doing the perimeter ride as a fundraiser for the boot campaign to raise awareness and support. Now, this is in 2011 is when we first started talking about it. Had a group of guys who said, yeah, let's do it. And then as we sort of started to plan it, and that's not just something you sit down on one weekend and plan.
Nope.
It took us about a year to route it out, to think about the stops. And so in 2013, we said, we're going, and we had the date set, and probably know where the story's going since you read the book.
Yeah, you're going on your own.
What started as a group of 10 turned to 8, turned to 7, turned to 5. And then 24 hours out, I was suddenly the lone survivor, and the ride hadn't started. And what was interesting about that, Eric, is I've ridden a lot in my career. I've done some big rides, never something of this scope, and never alone. But 24 hours out, when the last wingman fell off, I was faced with the decision, can I do this? And the answer is, I thought I could. And Wendy was very encouraging. She said, you've got to go. There's publicity around it. You just be careful, take your time. And so off I went. And I have to tell you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I had a route, and I had a plan, and I had an agenda, and I had fundraising stops to make, and interviews to do, and places to be, and people to meet. But because I was by myself, if I got a phone call from the boot campaign, or an email from a radio station, or a text from a veteran family who had heard about the ride because we had great publicity, then I could go off route at any time. And I could say, okay, I know I have to be in New Orleans today, but I'm going to stop, in Houston because of X. And I met some amazing people that I would have not met because I was able to go off route. The ride did go longer because of that, but that was okay. Wendy had said, go do your thing.
Yeah, I remember at some stage you say you're going to ride a little bit more that day because your family was coming to visit with you after several weeks.
Yeah, they ended up meeting me on the return trip. But so things happen for a reason. I absolutely believe that. And it made that ride so much more memorable for me. I know it made it more impactful for the boot campaign on the fundraising that we were able to do. But that ride, I came home and got off the bike, and that ride fundamentally changed who I am as a person, as a businessman, as a husband, as a father, as a brother, because I saw the living embodiment of service and sacrifice and passion, and taking the focus off of me and putting it on we. And I will... that's, other than marrying Wendy and fathering and parenting 2 great children, that's the great accomplishment of my life, is that I was able to see America for what it really is before all the craziness happened. And I believe that we are better than our lesser angels, because I saw it in people who every day were overcoming insurmountable challenges and setbacks and loss, and every day got up and said, I'm going to make my piece of the world better. And that's leadership. That's leadership.
Absolutely. I was listening to you right now, and I was thinking, first, bad thing, good thing, bad thing. You never know what can happen. You ended up being on your own, and it was completely life changing. But there's also, and I really encourage people to buy and read your book, Full-Throttle Leadership, because you're telling so many stories. One about those 2 veterans that you met at, I think, the Museum of War in New Orleans.
Yeah, the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Absolutely.
Yeah. But in terms of leadership and courage and being faced with yourself in the mirror, in the first third of the book, I want to say, when you start a ride and you're writing down Florida, and it's raining and there's thunders and what's going on in your head at that moment? You say, what the hell am I doing this? Why am I here? I could be home with Wendy, and what am I doing here?
Well, you know what? It's like everything else in leadership is, the three lessons that I talk about in the book is passion, power, and purpose, right? So we've talked about my passion for motorcycles, and we've talked about my passion for the boot campaign and for military families. But as my Southern grandmother would so eloquently say, passion don't feed the baby. And what that means is you can have all the passion in the world, but at some point during your professional or personal ride, the wheels are going to come off, the tank's going to get low, the support isn't going to be there, and you're going to be faced with a decision to get off the bike, go home, and say, well, I tried, or to power through it. And so for me, the power piece of it isn't a dynamic of control. It's knowing that you've developed the skills and the capabilities to weather any storm. We have a saying in the motorcycle community, you don't wait for the storms to pass, you learn to ride in the rain. And that's what happened to me in the first really 4 or 5 days of the ride, because I started down in Houston and headed east because I wanted everything on the throttle side to be the beautiful Gulf Coast. But I was also riding in late June and early July. So that is storm, that is heavy, heavy lightning. And when I got to Florida, I've ridden in some weather, my friend, but that was, cloud to ground, massive mortar shell lightning striking, winds driving over the south of the Skyway Bridge. Hello to all my friends in Tampa, with about a 40 or 50 mile an hour wind. Where that bridge is moving, you can't see the 18-wheeler that's 10 feet in front of you. I got water coming at me in Niagara Falls Cascades. I'm soaked to the bone. And yeah, that was the moment for me where I did stop. I had to kick it off the road because it was dangerous. Yeah. And I pulled into some little deserted Sinclair gas station and just, took the helmet out, the water came out, and I just said, wow, this is really dangerous. And I just talked to myself and said, okay, well, you're doing the right thing. You're taking a break. You're not going to go home. You're going to warm up. I had stuff with me, and then you're going to wait for a break and you're going to ride a little bit further. And that day that we're specifically talking about was really a 6-hour day of about 400 miles that turned into about a 10-hour day of about 600 miles because I had to go off path and I had to find the sunlight where I could, or at least a break in the rain. So part of leadership, part of life is understanding that there's a plan on paper and there's a plan in your head, but there's what unfolds as the plan. So you've got to train for it. You've got to constantly be learning. You've got to constantly be building up your skills. You've got to be developing capabilities that at the time you think, oh, that'll never happen. But that is a core component of leadership. And as a business owner, as a speaker, a trainer, and an author, I work with a lot of companies that are very hierarchy top down, and they always have problems because one person is supposed to have all the answers and all the solutions. They just don't have those capabilities.
I have never met this type of organization.
No, well, it's pretty rare, but we have to deal with them. So yeah, I think that you have to have something more than passion. Passion is great to have, but it is not going to sustain you when everything goes wrong. And I saw that in the life of veterans. Listen, I met double amputees and guys and gals that had been horribly burned in IED attacks, been blinded. I mean, they had a plan. Yeah. They had a life vision, and suddenly that life was gone. Yeah. They could have quit. They said, no, I'm gonna figure it out. And so for me, that was inspirational as well. And I got to tell you, when you've met some of the people that I've met who can really tell you what a bad day in the office is like. I have a friend of mine, Joey Jones, who's a Marine EOD tech. They're the guys who went and diffused all the IEDs, and he had what he called a bad day at the office. He stepped left instead of right, lost both of his legs, and he was a young man. He can tell you what a bad day's like. So I don't complain when I have a bad day in the office because I know what a bad day in the office looks like.
Yeah, and that's Thanks for the reminder. It's always, I'm listening to you, and I'm sure that everybody who's listening to you right now is thinking, yeah, Stephen is right. Everything is relative, and we should be grateful for what we have, and that's not such a bad day. And then the next thing you know, tomorrow they forget about it and go back to the same routine. It's interesting, the human mind. But you're talking about the three things in your book about passion, power, and purpose. You talk about passion, you talk about power. Would you have been able to go through that rain, through those challenges without the purpose? In other words, you have the passion, the power. Would you have continued the same way you continued if, for instance, you were not writing for the boot campaign and had that purpose with you?
Well, I'll thank you for the nice transition there, because that's exactly where we are. We're in purpose. And the answer to your question is no, I would not have been able to, because you need all three. Passion is, it's really about finding that ride for yourself. Power is about fueling the ride with skill and capability. Purpose is all about the purpose, because that's the focus of the ride. And for me, if I'd have done that perimeter ride the way that it was originally planned, is the guys were going to get together and we're going to go do this ride and see great iconic places in the country and have more than one or two adult beverages and take a lot of photos, and we would have gotten home, and what? It would have been a great trip, but it wouldn't have meant anything beyond us. And our wives would have at some point said, stop talking about your motorcycle ride. But because that ride wasn't about Stephen Foster, it was about the boot campaign. It was about the military veterans and families that they were servicing. And at that time, we were just trying to create awareness of things like post-traumatic stress and transitional issues. So every day, if something didn't go to plan, or if I just got tired, and let me tell you what, 34 days, 34 states, almost 15,000 miles, you get tired. Yep. That's a long time in the seat of a motorcycle. That's a long time with your hand on the throttle. That's a long time focusing and by yourself. You get tired. You get physically tired and emotionally tired. Every day when I got off that bike, I had a sense of accomplishment. I could look back and where had I been? What had we done? What had we accomplished? And I was so excited after a good night's sleep at some amazing hotel partners across the country. I was excited to get back on the bike because I knew today's a new day. It's a new opportunity. We get to push that needle just a little bit farther down the road. So purpose is the absolute glue that holds this whole model together. And if you're purposeful, if you have a reason for getting up, Simon Sinek would call it your why. But if you know that what you're doing is meaningful to someone beyond you and will fundamentally help someone have a better life, have a better outcome, then why wouldn't you saddle up? Why wouldn't you say, let's roll? To me, that was the piece that changed it for me when I got home, because I had been living, quite frankly, as many of us do, in a passion and a power world. The things that I love to do, the things that I wanted to do, the things that made me better at it, nothing wrong with that. I built a wonderful career on it. But it wasn't until I was refocused by boot campaign and looked at the opportunities that I had to be purposeful that I really felt like I came into the life I was supposed to have. And I had a pretty darn good life before, and it's amazing now because I do have that sense of what can I do today? And I would say this to your listeners because I get this a lot. Well, Stephen, you own your own business and you're aligned with a great organization, and and Eric said you're a legend, and so yeah, it's pretty easy for you, and I can't do that. And I would counter and say, do what the boot girls did. Do what those 5 women from Texas did. They were not professional fundraisers. They were not in the nonprofit space. They read a book and it touched their heart. And they said, let's go do something. And what they did was small. It was simple, but it was so profound. And it connected because people saw those combat boots. And here's the little gold nugget I've been waiting to give you during our interview. They connected with a saying as old as time. If you want to understand somebody, walk a while in their shoes, or in this case, boots. There was something about lacing up that pair of secondhand combat boots that people said, yeah, that's intentional. That's meaningful. And I know that there are men and women all over the world who are lacing up their boots right now, purposeful way to give me the freedoms and defend the life that I have. So,
absolutely.
So I have to do something. And I don't need to raise my hand and serve in the military, and I don't have to have a lot of money. I just need to be willing to say, I can do this one thing. And that's what I did. I took my passion for motorcycles. I did a pretty simple thing. I said, let's do a motorcycle ride. It evolved on its own. And it became something that still today I hear from people that I met. I still get to stand on a stage, talk about the boot campaign. I get to say the name of those 19 heroes who lost their life in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan in 2005. And I get to remind the people in this country and all around the world that we all have a debt of gratitude. Absolutely. We all owe somebody. We all can mentor. We all can be a bright light. All we have to be willing to do is say, here I am, and I can do this one thing.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that today, Stephen. And I can talk with you, listen to you for hours. Obviously, podcast is timing and everything. But before I ask you a last question, remind us again the tagline of the boot campaign.
It's when they come back, we give back.
I love it. How could people find more information? Bootcampaign.com?
Bootcampaign.com or .org, and it's bootcampaign.com or .org. Amazing organization. You don't have to ride motorcycles to participate. They do some amazing events. We've got a great program every Christmas called Santa Boots, where we curate Christmases for military families all over the country. It's just an amazing grassroots organization powered by people with passion, power, and purpose for giving back in the communities where we live, where we work, and where we meet.
And also, I've seen on the website, they do a lot now to help veterans which are confronted with PTSD, mental health issues and everything, right?
Yeah, probably the number one issue for all of our veterans and military families is the mental health, the wellness. Post-traumatic stress is a real thing. It manifests itself in lots of different ways. And that wasn't even a discussion that people were having when I was on that ride. That was not even on the radar. Absolutely.
And how do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can reach me at my website, foster-fathom.com, or on Facebook, Stephen Foster, Foster and Fathom, LinkedIn. Just type in Stephen Foster Motorcycle. You're probably going to find me.
Awesome. And then my last question. You told me earlier on that you had a bucket list, which has still had a lot of items on it.
It does.
Can you share one with us?
Well, I played my hand at riding on Air Force One. It is certainly up there. But another one that you're actually part of, it's performing in a band, because I know you're quite musical and I play an instrument, is performing live in a band with you at a major conference. Oh, I don't know, like maybe Meeting Professionals International's World Education Congress in Riviera Maya in 2023. That would be right up there with the rest of us for sure.
And just a point of information, this episode is absolutely not sponsored, nor by MPI, neither by Riviera Maya. But
that's it. It is.
It was a
probably
pleasure.
should be.
Sorry?
It probably should be. We're giving him a lot.
No. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing those amazing stories. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to seeing you soon, live and in person.
Thank you, Eric. Again, appreciate you, buddy. Always been proud to call you a friend, and congratulations on this podcast and what you're doing in the industry. You're helping us re-engage and rebuild our industry. And by the way, that's full of passion, power, and purpose. So you're full throttle, my friend.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you again for taking the time to speak with me. Amazing stories, inspiring stories. Thank you for what you're doing. And oh my God, I just enjoy reading your book, Full-Throttle Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. Thank you.